All right. Good evening and welcome, everyone. It's nice and loud. I'm Jason Smith. Welcome you all to the FourBlock Executive Speaker Series. We're joining you today here from the offices of J. Walter Thompson, one of the premier ad agencies in the world for marketing services, and for many years has been the primary marketing agency for the Marine Corps. We thank them for hosting us tonight. We're going to have a wonderful session today in which we're going to share some information about corporate etiquette and culture from a very distinguished guest speaker who I'll introduce in a moment. Before we get going, I want to tell a little bit about FourBlock and who we are for those who might see this and not know what FourBlock is about. FourBlock is an organization that was created for one sole purpose. It's to help transitioning military veterans who are currently in or recently finishing a degree program to get career ready, to learn that polish, to be that polished diamond that they are from the rough stones that they were coming from the military. All the great things we know from being veterans, we need that little extra edge to know exactly how to connect to the corporate culture in the right way, which brings us to our topic today. We've got a fantastic guest speaker tonight who's going to tell us about the corporate cultures we're going to be going into and how we can better adapt to them and exist and do well to be better members of the society. Amen? Our speaker tonight is Mr. Lloyd Knight. Lloyd Knight retired from the Air Force in 2007, Air Force, after 20 years of service. During that time, he logged over 3,000 flight hours as a load master on several operational and test flight aircrafts, including the C-141 Starlifter, C-5 Galaxy, and the mighty C-23 Sherpa. He served in Operation Just Cause, Desert Storm, and Iraqi Freedom, and several others. Since leaving the military, Lloyd has served as the freight forwarding director at UPS, based in UPS Supply Chain Solutions corporate headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. Lloyd began his career at UPS in 2007. In addition to his current role, he has served several various roles, including government tender manager, government operations manager, global government operations director. Outside of his work at UPS, Lloyd started the first UPS Veteran Business Resource Group in Atlanta and co-founded the VETLANTA organization, where he still serves as president and chairman of the board. VETLANTA is an industry collaboration of veteran-friendly affiliate organizations striving to make Atlanta the top destination for veterans and their families. He's an active volunteer for multiple veteran nonprofit organizations, including American Corporate Partners, FourBlock, the Veteran Empowerment Organization, and Hire Heroes USA. Lloyd is the two-time recipient of the Covenant President Volunteer Service Award. In 2008, he was the Jim Casey Community Service Award winner, an award that's given to just one of the 434,000 global UPS employees for demonstrating excellent commitment to helping others in their community. Lloyd is married to his wife, Susan, for over 30 years and has two sons. Please welcome, with a warm round of applause, Mr. Lloyd Knight.
Well, thank you. First and foremost, thank you to FourBlock for and Jason for the warm introduction and for the invite to speak tonight. The FourBlock is something very near and dear to my heart, and I'm passionate about helping veterans find employment, and nobody has a finer niche and does it better than a FourBlock in their space. And also got to say, thanks to JWT. So the JWT is a very near and dear to my heart as well, because this is the roots of VETLANTA. They've done the advertising for the U.S. Marine Corps, close to 80 years, or maybe over 70 years. And when we decided to start FourBlock, when we decided to start VETLANTA 4 years ago, there was about 15 of us, and we really didn't know how to do it. And we sat down with JWT, and they gave us some excellent advice on how to form and design our logo. So it's really very cool to be back here. So we'll go to the first slide, please. So we'll talk a little bit about a corporate culture and why corporate culture is very important to recognize. And when you're looking for a job, and I was really shocked when I was looking at this topic to find that roughly 2/3, this is crazy, 2/3 of veterans are likely to leave their first job after the military within 2 years because of problems like low job satisfaction, limited opportunities for advancement, and the fact is they didn't really consider corporate culture when selecting a company to start their next career with. Next slide. So I think it's really important to really define culture and exactly what culture is, because I think when you come to corporate culture, there's some misconceptions, and corporate culture is really a belief, or refers to the beliefs and behaviors that determine companies, employees, and management, how they interact and how they handle outside business transactions. The often corporate culture, this is a very interesting one. Often, not always, and I'll talk a little bit about UPS culture later, but culture is implied and not expressly defined. And it develops organically, which is also very interesting. Organically over time, really from the traits of the people in that organization. We'll go to the next slide, please. And the one after that. And we'll do the one after that. So why is culture important? Well, the first thing is it attracts talent, and potential job applicants are really evaluating culture, and especially today, right? The environment today is much different. National unemployment is 4%, less than 4%, and really, if you look at the people who actively want a job and currently looking for a job, it's almost zero in most locations. So the applicants are doing a reverse job interview, really. They're deciding if they want to work for you. So I think one of the most important things is attract talent. And then it drives both engagements and retention. So, you know, if an employee feels wanted and is the culture is welcome, they're most likely going to stay at your organization. And as a hiring manager and somebody who's hired a lot of people, you know, when I go to hire somebody, I'm looking for the right candidate, the right fit, that they have the technical skills. But I also want somebody who's going to be able to who stay and thrive, because, you know, when I have to retrain an employee, that is very, very expensive. And sometimes when an employee leaves, just because of internal processes, I have, you know, gaps of weeks and even months before I can put a replacement in. So it impacts happiness and satisfaction. Research shows that employee happiness and satisfaction is linked to a strong workplace culture. So it's not the salary that makes your employees happy. Well, you know, it can't hurt, but really it's the culture that is driving employee satisfaction. And culture definitely impacts, you know, performance. Organizations with strong culture outperform competitors in financial performance, are generally more successful. And, you know, I want to quote Steve Cannon. So Steve Cannon is a Army veteran, the president and CEO of the Arthur Blank Company. And I heard him speak one time, and he mentioned customer experience starts with workplace culture. And 100% of the time, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think that's just absolutely brilliant. Next slide. So what impacts culture? And the first and foremost is, I 100% agree, is leadership. So leadership, your leaders are going to impact both your individual work groups and your company culture. One thing to consider is companies oftentimes are vastly different from the military on the length of stay of a boss, right? And when I was a first sergeant of the Air Force, I would always say, don't worry about if you have a bad boss, because the one consistent is bosses are come and go, whether they're bad ones or good ones. Being in corporate America, it's vastly different, right? You can do your entire career with some of the same leaders. So it's something you definitely need to take into consideration. So is leadership and management. Workplace practices. So workplace practices can be really different. Let me talk a little bit about UPS. When I came into UPS, I came from I was a first sergeant of a communications group. I had 5 flights in that group that and I was always, you know, visiting a flight. It was a very social job. You know, if somebody's wife was a spouse was having a baby, I was in the hospital. If somebody went to the ER, I was there. If somebody was getting promoted, I was there, and it was a really very sociable job. And then I retired on a Friday from UPS or from the Air Force and started with UPS on a Monday. And I'm now in corporate America in a corporate headquarters, and it was a much different atmosphere. You know, I was pretty much chained to my cube. And I was the only one responsible for that particular job, and I wasn't engaging with much of anybody else in the building. And it's Atlanta, and Atlanta people take off on the at 5 p.m. and on the weekends, and it was really hard to get people together. And we would occasionally do you know, a social event or a United Way event, but it didn't. The culture really impacted me for a couple of years, and then I was lucky enough. UPS decided to start these business resource groups, and I started the very first one at UPS in Atlanta, and it allowed me to really be more engaged with my coworkers. And so that's something you definitely want to take in consideration as the workplace practices. The policies and philosophies, which we'll talk a little bit about. You know, if the company's policies and philosophies greatly differ than your policies and philosophies, there is going to be, you know, some disconnect with you, right? You're probably not going to be too happy with that. The people in the organization, right? One of the greatest advantages of the military is we've got great people. And you know, most companies have great people, but there are organizations that don't. So you need to take a look at that, and I'll talk a little bit about how to do the research. The mission, visions, and values. You know, the values is a big thing to consider. The military, we have our own set of values, right? And if the Air business attire, 12 years ago, we were formal suit. You didn't dare get out of your cube or leave your office without having a coat on and definitely a tie. So know the work environment you're going into. And finally, the way the company communicates. So are you going to be comfortable with the way they communicate? Is it too casual? Is it too formal for you? So you know, oftentimes you'll agree with you know, your company's policies and philosophies and the people, but if it's not communicated in a manner you're uncomfortable with, it's going to create conflict. We'll go to the next slide. And if you go to Google, if you go to the news, there's all kinds of stories. Very successful people that struggled in companies because of culture. And this is just, you know, 3 high-level examples that made the news. Think about, you know, the veterans around Atlanta, around FourBlock community, around the veteran community. You know, this kind of conflict is happening all the time. So you know, the Jeff Jones from Uber. So if anybody follows Uber, this was a very high-level case, and really they had a big disconnect. The culture of Jeff Jones and the culture of Uber was dramatically different, and he ended up leaving the company because this news story said that his values didn't align with Uber's. And the next one is Thomas Campbell was the director-in-chief of the Met Museum for 8 years. And one of the things he found was he ended up leaving because of cultural clashes. So he tried to change the culture in the museum without properly accounting for the internal conflict. You know, culture, when it's well established, it's a very hard thing to change, right? So the try to dramatically change the culture overnight, there's going to be some serious conflict there. And the last one is was Tony Fadell, a former star executive at Apple, and they worked for a group called Nest, and he tried to really change the culture, and he ended up describing the culture as a harsh corporate culture at Nest, abrasiveness on his parts, and he led to his resignation. And then look what happened. The culture was out of alignment, and it led to his resignation, stymied product development, and had disappointing revenue growth. Think about that, disappointing revenue growth specifically attributed to the corporate culture. We'll go to the next slide. So, oftentimes veterans are not considering corporate culture until after they transitioned and after they took the job. And I guarantee you that if you would ask 10 veterans or a group of veterans that are transitioning from the military what they're looking for in their career, corporate culture probably wouldn't be in the top 5. Benefits, the commute, advancement. These are all things that we hear when we're assisting transitioning veterans, and I guarantee after a couple of years that culture is always going to be in the top 5, and some of those other things become less important. So what can you do? Well, the biggest thing you can do is do your homework. Do your homework. There's a lot of great resources. There's articles. There's news. Talk to an expert. Talk to somebody who's gone through it before. LinkedIn is a great resource to do your homework and connect with people. Nonprofit organizations. We mentioned several tonight that I'm involved with. The FourBlock. Number one. Use your FourBlock avenue to talk to some experts. Another great one is American Corporate Partners, Hire Heroes USA, VETLANTA. Use that network to help you with that homework. When you have a chance, perform an on-site values check. It's great to show up and look around an organization, to do drive by the campus. One of the great things about VETLANTA and is we get to go spend times in companies like UPS and Coca-Cola and Centos and before veterans transition or during their transition, but before they apply for those companies, so you can really readily do an on-site values check. And LinkedIn, again, try to connect with somebody from that company that you're doing research on. The worst they can do is ignore you, right? Generally, people want to help veterans, and they'll connect with veterans and have a series of questions that you can ask and to really get a good grasp of the corporate culture. And then when you're in the interview, who's doing all the talking in the interview, right? The person that's interviewing you, are they trying to sell you to take the position? Is it a 100% sell job, right? Are they listening to you? Are they allowing you to speak? Ask questions about about corporate culture. One of the hardest things at helping transitioning veterans is they often ask, what questions do I ask? And a question that I would always ask is, hey, do you like working here? Why do you like working here? What do you like about the culture? That's a great opportunity to ask questions. And then on job and recruiting sites, and I'll definitely say be cautious on this, right? There's a lot of websites devoted to disgruntled employees. So generally people don't get on a website and go, hey, I love the job. The people there are great. This was amazing. Generally, when you get on the websites, it's disgruntled employees, right? And they had an issue with their boss or the culture, and they're just giving you the negative approach. So do your homework. Definitely check out some of those sites, but take them with a grain of salt. Next slide, please. So I love to talk about UPS, company culture. So we have a really unique culture, and something that's happening with our culture is it's changing. So here on August 28th, this is great. UPS will celebrate our 111th anniversary, and I guarantee you that more has changed in our culture probably in the last 11 years than the previous 100. So the times are changing, or we're having to adjust our culture, but it's a good thing. Our culture is driven by integrity, service, quality, efficiency, and this great tidbit called constructive dissatisfaction. Constructive dissatisfaction means even when things are going really, 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 really good, you got to take an honest look at how things are going and decide if you can do better. We did great today, but how are we going to do tomorrow? What can we do tomorrow to make things better? And we talked a little bit earlier about, hey, culture really is unwritten guidance. UPS is kind of a little bit different. We have this policy book right here. And this book, only half of it's a policy book, and you can see it's really, really thin. And it's not like the military regulations where they tell you exactly how to act, and why you're acting in a way. It helps guide, and it's interesting. It's got our company, our employees, our community, and our share owners, and it helps us kind of define our culture and to help guide the decisions we make. We have a strong promote from within culture, and that's starting to change. We've seen big changes in that in the last year, but generally we're not hiring too many senior level people off the streets. If you look at all the CEOs we've had, all but one have started in operations, loading trucks, delivering packages. Even our current CEO today, David Abney, he was a college student in Mississippi, and a lot of his friends were able to take their girlfriends out for a good meal or to the movies or entertainment, and he didn't have the money. And he decided to go work for UPS loading trucks to earn money to take his girlfriend out. And the great thing is all these years later, he's a now CEO of the company and married his girlfriend. So it's a unique culture at UPS. You know, people we promote from within and they work their way up to the top. Diversity and inclusion. Everybody talks about diversity and inclusion, and I can tell you UPS means it's one of the few organizations that have seen that is as diverse as our United States military, and anybody has an opportunity there to succeed. And it's a really wonderful first name basis. I've got one of the things I do is I oversee the education with industry program at UPS, where active duty Air Force and Navy officers come work for me for about 11 months, and then return to their position in the military. And I got a naval officer that just showed up this week, and he keeps saying sir and ma'am, and that doesn't actually fly at UPS. It's a really strict first name basis. We had a VETLANTA summit last week at UPS, and there was a group of UPS volunteers that were volunteering in getting together in a lobby, and our CEO David Abney walked by, and it was, "Hi David, how are you doing?" So there's no Mr. or Mrs. or a job title or sir or man behind that. It's a first name basis, and it takes a little bit getting used to, especially coming from the military. Education is really, really, really important to UPS. And I know there's some people who see, some companies that see it different, but for most of our supervisor and higher positions, they require a 4-year degree. And what I like about it is it's set. You know, our policy is we require a 4-year education to become a supervisor. Very conservative, protecting the brand. You know, our brand is everything. It's a conservative brand. You're not gonna see it flashed all over the place. You come to the UPS supply chain corporate headquarters in Alpharetta. It's not even a colored brand on front of the building. It's black and white. If you've been lucky enough to go to our corporate headquarters in Sandy Springs, a lot of people pass it, you know, and will drive right down the road and miss it. You know, the brand's real small. So we're about protecting the brand. One of the great things when we formed VETLANTA and our great logo, VETLANTA logo that was developed by JWT, we're all about protecting the brand. And it's because the founders of VETLANTA came from UPS and Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines and AT&T and GE and Home Depot, and all companies that really have a brand that is a great brand, and they're doing good service, and you have to protect that brand to be successful. And like I said before, our culture it's changing, and it's rapidly changing, and we're going through this thing that just started called transformation, and it's going to be a ride. So really our culture a year from now, or 3 years from now, or 5 years now can be rapidly different, and that's a culture in itself, right? Be ready for change. We'll go to the next slide, please. So I originally, when I've taught this block, I left it at culture, and I really wanted to talk about business etiquette, because really business etiquette and will help you with that homework, right? When you come out to a FourBlock event, if it's one of the companies, you got to really know how to engage and how to use your network. And I can tell you, veterans are great at networking with other veterans. Veterans are horrible at networking with people that aren't veterans. So we do all these big events, and it was oftentimes it'll be all the veterans on one side and all the non-veterans on the other. And my job the whole night is to make people collaborate. So learning that etiquette, how to collaborate and how to network and engage is really important. And here's a great question I ask when I first started doing some formal research for this: is business etiquette a firm set of rules which guide business engagements? How many people in this room think business etiquette is some written rules? It's great. I thought it was written rules. You know why? Because I spent a lot of money on books. Going to the bookstore and learning business etiquette. Really, there's hundreds and thousands of books written. So next slide. Business etiquette is just the opposite of that. Business etiquette is simply about building relationships with other people. Think about it. Business etiquette is about building relationships with other people. Etiquette is not about rules and regulations. Etiquette is simply about providing basic social comfort and creating an environment where others feel comfortable and secure. So pretty cool, huh? Others feel comfortable and secure. If you look at that picture there, I was really blessed. UPS sent me to Hong Kong during peak season last year, and I got to go really experience a whole different culture. Being a loadmaster in the Air Force, I've been all around the world, but I've never really dealt with the Chinese culture, the Hong Kong culture, and it was an opportunity for me to work on the business side of the house, but really I was successful because I spent some time working on that culture and developing those relationships. Next slide. So why is etiquette important? So etiquette is important because it facilitates engagement and relationship building. So if somebody's etiquette differs from your expectations, there's going to be some conflict there, right? It's going to be hard to engage with that person. It's going to be hard to build those relationships. And if your etiquette is off, it's going to be hard for you maybe to find a job, maybe to make those connections. So you need to really determine what your etiquette needs to look like and how to engage. Business etiquette promotes a positive atmosphere and improves communication. Usually when you have conflict is often because there's been a lack of communication. Definitely business etiquette will breed confidence. If you know how to act and you feel comfortable, you're going to be confident, and you're going to thrive in both those business and social interactions, and it enhances employability, right? When you go to a networking event and you're a wallflower and you're not engaging with anybody, you're missing an opportunity. You're not making those connections. And then even worse, if you show up and you're the odd duck, right? And you might not be attractive to the person who could employ you or the company. It improves productivity and can really, improve career success. Next slide. So etiquette tips. So I think there's a couple of tips here. The first is the internet and bookstores are full of articles and books. Refer to that first rule we talked about, right? So etiquette is not really strict written guidelines. Those books are great to read and always consider, but there's other things to consider. And do your homework. Understand the environment that you're going to, right? So if you're going to a UPS event, it's going to be rapidly different than going to an Amazon event or going to an event at Google, right? You got to know your environment and you got to do homework on that environment. Account for cultural differences, right? So definitely when I was in Hong Kong, there were a lot of cultural differences. And I was a world traveler and I was used to dealing with a lot of cultures, and I had definitely done my homework to prep for that, but there was a couple things that I was unaware of, and I've got a couple examples. The first one was when we went out to eat. I was really prepped for going out to eat, but then I encountered this thing called the Lazy Susan. So the Lazy Susan, if you've ever been to a Chinese restaurant, it's usually a round table, 12 to 14 seats, and it spins. And they come put dishes in front of you, especially when you're eating dim sum. There's always food coming out. And it took me a little bit to figure out that every dish that was set on the table, it spun my way because I was the highest ranking person at the table and I was a guest. And then one of the things I really had to figure out was the employees, they weren't getting their fill until I said I was full. And unfortunately, it took me like the third meal to figure that out, right? So once I said I was full, everybody felt very comfortable and they were able to eat their share. So, well, what did that do, right? Well, that helped me build the relationships. Eating chopsticks, eating what was put in front of me, right? So I ate chicken feet. So they loved that I ate chicken feet, and it opened up a dialogue by itself, and they became very accustomed to me, and we got along great. So understand the cultural differences. Know the basics, and that's where those books come in, right? You don't have to get all detailed, but knowing the basics is important. And then the biggest one is talk to somebody who's already experienced that, right? So sitting down with somebody and hearing it from somebody who has years of experience with corporate culture and with networking is really important. And FourBlock is a great opportunity to do that, and some of the other ones. VETLANTA is a great opportunity. Next slide, please. And one of the so out of all those books I've read, you go to my office, there's management books everywhere, and some of them are pretty thick. One of the best books I read was actually a very small, maybe 100-page book. I think I read it in about 3 hours, and it's called "Don't Take the Last Donut" by Judith Bowman, and she talks about just some of the very basics when you go out to eat. When you're how to dress. I know Anna does a great thing on how to dress, and even blue jeans. How to wear blue jeans, what blue jeans to wear, and so she does a great job with not delving into corporate cultures and etiquette in all scenarios. She talks about the basics. You have, and I know Jason talks about this, coaches, mentors, and executive advisors. Those are great people to reach out to and specifically talk about business etiquette and culture. FourBlock instructors, YouTube. I'm a big fan of YouTube, right? There's YouTube has videos for everybody. And when I deployed to Hong Kong, we'll talk about UPS University in a little bit. I did a lot of UPS University courses to help me prepare for that deployment. But I also went to YouTube a lot, and I probably watched about an hour worth of the different culture and etiquette videos. And then if you're a UPSer and you're listening tonight, these are 4 great classes in UPS University that you can use as a resource. Next slide, please. That's it. So, does you have any questions? I think Jason's going to facilitate questions both online and here in the room.
All right, everyone, give him a hand. Thank you so much, Lloyd. Appreciate it. Keep your microphone. Am I coming through in the audio? Good. Yes? Good to go. All right. Well, now we're going to open it up to some questions. And Lloyd, I hope you're ready. We've got a very sharp group, and we've got a few questions in the room. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the microphone to you all. If you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring it to you. I know we've all got our inside voices on, so use the microphone so it can get recorded and go out, all right? So who first has a question? And we'll also be taking questions from the chat line. So those of you all who have questions for the speaker and you're remotely tuning in via the web link on Skype, go ahead and use the chat function and send your questions this way. So who's got the first question and would like to ask Lloyd about anything he said in his presentation? Yeah, okay. Air Force, there we go.
Hey Lloyd, thanks for speaking. Eric Rathke from Citibank. Question for you about your culture search and finding UPS. I mean, you retired on a Friday, started on a Monday. Don't know how much time you put research into it, and you also said, I think you've been there about 11 years now, and you've said it's changed more in 11 years than 100. How have you dealt with changing culture, and does it still align? And where's your head at on how that culture has changed for you over time?
Well, that's a great question, and one of the things I've been very surprised at is I've been able to impact the culture. So which I didn't think in a million years. UPS is the size of the U.S. Army, the 454,000 people now. So and that's our non-peak staffing, and I started the Veterans Business Resource Group, became an advocate. UPS really jumped on board VETLANTA, and I'm surprised at the impact I've had. Right, so I've done small things. UPS has a coin now, a military veterans coin. So I largely started that culture at UPS. I've gone and taught our management committee how to give somebody a coin, right? That you just don't hand it off, you put it in your palm and you shake their hand. I've been lucky enough to be engaged with the corporate HR and marketing and helping them with our veteran strategy. So I think I've really impacted the culture within my media work group, right? So that's where it starts. It starts with your media work group, and I'm not doing anything vastly different than I did my entire 20-year Air Force career. I'm acting like me, and successful in the Air Force, and I've had to maybe change my communication style a little bit and understand some of the basics of etiquette. Sometimes you see culture aspects and you shut up in color, like, hey, that's the way it is. And sometimes you determine what impact you can have in changing that culture.
We got a follow-up question to that one, Lloyd. Being that you were able to impact the culture that you were in, what aspects of being a veteran were you able to keep from the military culture and bring with you, and what did you have to leave behind?
That's a great question. So I at the beginning especially, I had to understand when to swim in my lane. So right, I came in as a manager. I was blessed to come in right as a manager, but there was I wanted to do bigger and better things. And I wasn't able to. I had to learn the environment before I could do that. So I think I've had to relax a little bit. So over the years, being in first sergeant mode. So there was a lot of things that I don't miss about being a first sergeant. I don't miss going to get people out of jail. Those late night calls. So largely at UPS, with if an employee goes to jail and they don't come to work. You know, they miss work, and you miss work, you lose a job. So you don't have to deal with that legal component of it. But I've had to, I've had to adjust my leadership style a bit, but not vastly different. I was in the Air Force. The Air Force is a lot like UPS, right? So our culture is the same. You know, probably the thing I missed was at the end of the day for the first couple weeks, I kept looking for my hat. So I had to put a hat on when I left the building.
Good evening, Lloyd. Sharon Cyrus, you mentioned when you said the veterans were in one area and everyone else was in another area. What are some of the tools that you use to get the two parties to intermingle? And what are one of the ways that you use to make them realize that they have more similarities than dissimilarities?
So yeah, great question. The first one is often brute force. So it's really having people that are familiar in the space and know what's going to go on with the crowd, and having them engage the two parties. So so if it's a UPS event and there's UPS management that is going to be at a veteran event for maybe the first time, we'll actually let them know. It's like, hey, this is what you're going to see. We'll give them a brief. This is how you engage. This is some of the things you can ask. This is some of the things you can't. And then on the reverse is exactly what we're doing now, right? When you can get in front of large groups and have these kind of chats. You know, I'm out here volunteering. You know, because you know I've been there, done that, and you know if I share it with you, it's going to make life easier for the transitioning veteran. So it's engagement, and the one thing I have is a piece of advice, and I know FourBlock, this is a big part of FourBlock, is have your elevator speech ready to go. So no joke, that elevator speech will pay dividends for you. So, and I know we practice this in every one of the FourBlock events I've been to. You do it a couple times, and then they do it every single class. Have that elevator speech, and not only have that elevator speech ready to go, but have versions of that elevator speech. I see the elevator speech given in an elevator every day, right? Because I have elevators in my building. So you should have a version of it that's 15 or 20 seconds. And then you should also have an elevator speech that's 2 or 3 minutes long. And then the most important thing you can do after the elevator speech, what do you think that is? What's the most important thing? Follow up. Follow up. So I spoke at a Asian American Veterans Asian American Business Resource Group 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about networking, and the group there was great at networking. Nobody was good at following up. So they had all this engagement, and there was no ask at the end of the conversation. So have an ask. You know, ask somebody for a cup of coffee. Ask somebody for career advice. Ask them questions about how they handle corporate culture and business etiquette. So the follow up is important.
Hi, Mr. Lloyd. Keyshawn Ballard. So my question is two-part. One is, how do you groom based off the information you've provided and just experiences in general? Not a successor, but how do you groom a mentee or someone that would want to become as successful as you, one, as a first sergeant, and two, in corporate world for UPS, for the supply area?
That's a great. It's all about succession planning, right? So at UPS we have a very formal succession planning system, and at VETLANTA, hey, I love VETLANTA. It's great, but I put in 600 hours a year just in VETLANTA work, and so I'm looking eventually to find a successor, right? So how I do it is I'm a come follow me. So they come to VETLANTA events, whether you're looking for you're a transitioning veteran or you're a spouse and you're looking to find your next career. Come watch how VETLANTA engages, right? Spend some time over coffee. They get together and talk about articles, right? Talk about books. I think some of the best things at FourBlock is you have great content, right? But I think In addition to that, it's the networking that goes on before and after, and then the follow-up. So I can tell after each after each FourBlock event, I'm the next week I'm coming home late every day because I'm having coffee with somebody afterwards. And it's great if you talk about a certain topic and build that knowledge and become comfortable, right? Practice. I was in the first VETLANTA meeting that we had at Coca-Cola, which eventually became VETLANTA. I didn't talk that first meeting, so I didn't, which is funny if you look at it now, but I didn't say a word. So maybe an introduction, that was it, and eventually I became comfortable in my surroundings and with engaging with people, and I learned by doing. Come have coffee. So you know where to find me. So, and I'm on LinkedIn. So if anybody connects with me on LinkedIn, so I'll respond back. I respond 100% of the time on LinkedIn.
All right, Lloyd, we've got a couple of questions from the chat line. I'll go ahead and read one from one of your VETLANTA team members, Tyler Freeman. He says, Lloyd, corporate culture is clearly complex. What are some simple things that we can do as prospective employees to make sure that where we are hoping to work is the right place for us? Are there any specific questions that you like to ask to make sure that the shoe fits?
That's good. So I think the first one is find somebody who's not in the hiring process, right? So so oftentimes when you go to engage a company, you're talking to the recruiter. Well, a recruiter's getting paid to recruit you, right? So why they'll be honest with you, and for the most part, they're not overly concerned with retention. So it's finding somebody who's not really connected with the recruiting process. And LinkedIn is really, really important. Ask people on LinkedIn, read, and then what's important to you, right? So take a look at your values and determine is community service big in this company? So like community service is really important to me. Right, so I can tell you UPS is community services. If you pick up our policy book, it's all about community service. It's about hiring a local workforce, because if we hire a local workforce, they're going to be engaged with that community. So while other companies, I spent a lot of time in Dubai over the years with UPS. So a lot of companies, you go to Dubai and it's all Western nationals, right? So that culture would be vastly different. So learning some of the basics. How does that company engage? How do they communicate? So you can do some reading, but really is find somebody that is disassociated with that hiring process that you can have honest and open dialogue with.
One more from the chat line, sir. Excellent question from Jared. How does a vet evaluate an organizational culture when the overall culture that they may see during their research and interview process may or may not be different than the subcultures found at the district, regional, or lower levels?
Yeah, that is a great question. So look at UPS in Atlanta. So at UPS in Atlanta, we have 3 corporate headquarters. So we have our global corporate headquarters, we have our UPS Capital headquarters, and we have our supply chain headquarters. I can tell you the culture just between those 3 buildings is different. Overall, the culture is the same, right? But or similar, but each building has its own unique culture. And then with work groups, it's going to be even different. Then if you go into UPS operations, if you go into a small package storage, right? Or if you go into a UPS freight operations facility, that culture, of course, is going to be vastly different than going to a company headquarters. So we've seen it. We participate in several internship programs, veteran and non-veteran, and somebody comes and experiences a couple weeks to 2 or 3 months with UPS in a corporate environment, and then they get hired in one of our operations facilities. Whoa, wait a minute, this is not what I've experienced. So so I think it's really important when you're doing that homework, try to find the most similar environment. Not a big deal if it's a small company, right? If it's a smaller, medium-sized company, could be a great big deal if you have a very large company like the Fortune 500s that are based here. So try to get kind of what that local workplace is, and then the culture of an organization, you can have impact, right? So if you're hired to lead a group, you're going to have an impact on that culture. But you also have to understand your position, right? So if you're being hired as an hourly employee or as a specialist, you're going to be able to impact your like 5-foot circle around you, but you're likely not going to have a bigger impact on the culture. So the culture can be largely what it is. So yeah, very good question.
Excellent. And this will be our last question from the chat line for today. Recommendations, Mike, you have for us?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
What other book recommendations?
Oh, book recommendations. So Judith Bowman wrote a second book that I thought it was good, very good too. But the book recommendations, I'll leave it up to the people, right? Because oftentimes I'll get a great book, really dig, and then I'll hand it over to one of my mentees or proteges, and they don't get it. So reading can be very personal and different from one person to the next. So there's so many books to read, but just remember the book is only a guideline, right? None of the books are going to give you principles that are going to be effective and from one that's like copy and paste everywhere you go, right? You're going to have to determine what the culture is at each place and how you interact with that culture, how your etiquette should be. And it's largely, you can do your homework, but until you get in that environment and figure out, it's going to be a process of learning.
Excellent. Well, Lloyd, you've got a fantastic organization there in VETLANTA, and from the volunteer work that we heard in your bio, we know that you've got a lot of good things coming up. So could you tell us, as you wrap up here, a little bit about VETLANTA, what you've got coming up next, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, great. So VETLANTA is we're just a collaboration of right now it's over 2,000 members, and we started 4.5 years ago, and just 15 people sitting in a room at Coca-Cola talking about best practices and lessons learned, and really at the time just wanting to find employment for veterans within our own companies. And then we ended up taking a bigger and broader approach and helped and invited anybody who wanted to help veterans to join our organization. And it grew for a couple reasons. Our growth has been huge in Atlanta, and the first one is we don't take any money. So we decided to form as a club and not as a nonprofit. And the number one reason we decided to do that was we didn't want to take any money away from our foundations or companies, from FourBlock or from Hire Heroes USA or from Veterans Empowerment Organization. We didn't want to divert $1 to run our organization. And then we didn't want to, we wanted to be pretty flexible. And that really flipped the script in two ways. First, it flipped the script within our own companies and foundations. You can imagine how many emails and conversations that the UPS Foundation or the Home Depot Foundation, so the gets from from veteran causes and from other causes. So one of our elevator speech is when we go to introduce a company to VETLANTA, we tell them we don't want your money. We actually are chartered not to take any money or distribute any money. And I tell you, that gets their attention right away. And what we ask is for collaboration and volunteerism. And then it's flipped the script with the nonprofits in the world as well. Because the nonprofits show up and they immediately see Coke and UPS and AT&T and JWT and some of the big ones and think there's going to be a big check in it for them. And what we tell them is we don't have any money. So we have a dummy Form 990 that we keep with all zeros on it. So but what we tell them is like, hey, this is a great way to come out and collaborate. And most of our foundations require volunteer hours. And this is a way to get a corporate, volunteer hours into your organization, and then the grants will follow. So we're focused on making Atlanta the #1 destination for veterans. we're pretty good at it. We have 6 pillars. Check us out at VETLANTA.org. We just had one of our summits. We have quarterly summits. We just had our last summit at UPS. 325 people showed up. It was pretty good with the Army Inspector General, Lieutenant General Leslie Smith was our keynote. And our next one is going to be October 25th at Georgia Tech Scheller School of Business, and we're looking forward to it. If anybody wants to come out and collaborate or in the Atlanta area, we welcome you. If you're in a city across the country and you want our game plan, you want to hear how we did it, you can have our charter. We'll sit down on a call with you and give you our best practices and lessons learned, because we're just focused on Atlanta. So we want to make Atlanta the top destination for veterans, but we'll help you make Seattle or Dallas or Charlotte or Birmingham the best destination for veterans as well.
Well, Lloyd, we really appreciate your time today, and I literally just didn't have enough hands with our recording microphone here. So I'm going to ask Joseph Hambone Ham, the backbone of the business here, to present to you a FourBlock coin. Thank you for keeping the tradition going, another military tradition, and we hope to see you around the FourBlock community a lot more. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. One more hand for me. For those of you online who are still wanting to ask questions, there's still some time on the chat line. Send it to us. We'll make sure we get Lloyd to answer your questions. Anyone else in the room will be networking with Lloyd afterwards, so you can continue to ask questions. And we hope you get to meet the other people in the room as well. We encourage all of you all out there who are looking for the next event like this, for the next speaker series event, try to find where we'll be in your local area. These will be happening every other month. So if you'd like to be here in the room to participate and meet the executives, please stay tuned and be here for the next one. For those of you who are not in FourBlock yet and you're thinking about it, a lot of what Lloyd said about doing your research and doing your homework, FourBlock is here to help you with that. We help veterans come through that big security desk and that locked door that you can't get in to see the inside of these organizations and meet and see these cultures firsthand if you can plug into a FourBlock cohort in your local area. Here in Atlanta, we'll have 2 starting this semester. So make sure you find out at FourBlock.org how you can plug in, and we'll make sure that you can bridge the gap between where you are and where you'd like to be in corporate America. And with that, we're going to wrap up today's speaker series. We thank you all for coming. If you've got any further questions, reach out to us or email me at jsmith@fourblock.org. Thank you very much, and y'all have a great night.